Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President E-Meter, a Siemens business, Lisa Caswell.
Good morning. Oh, it's a little quieter today. Good morning. There we go. Sorry we're running a few minutes late. We just came out of our Women in Utilities breakfast, and I know you're dying to know what came out of that. Actually, the big theme about it was STEMs and what we're doing, and I really actually wanted to bring that back here because one of the gentlemen came in and he said, "Can I come sit in on this?" And I said, "Of course you can." He said, and I said, "Maybe you'll get something out of it." And he said, "What I'd really like to know is what can we do to encourage, more women and other things and taking on other roles in the utilities business." And I thought that was really unique. And so one of the things that we challenged each of the tables at breakfast with was, what are you doing in the utility business to encourage the study of science, technology, engineering and math in the schools and in our community so that we can grow up? Because if we look at who's taking on leadership roles within the utilities, in many cases they've either come from the line jobs, and that's probably not legacy women that have had the opportunities to do that, or they're taking on finance, or more importantly now, the technology roles. And so as far as what can we all do, I'd actually pose that challenge out to all of you in our leadership roles and what we can do to encourage the study of science, technology, engineering, and math. One of the most sought out jobs that we have, and we're having to fight to get a lot of H-1B visas, and that's struggling for me in a number of areas, is in the area of data scientists, because we're not creating enough of them in our own communities and in our own schools, and we're not forcing the discipline and then some of these harder skills and quant skills and things like that. So that really was one of the big takeaways, and I'd actually think it's not just for the women to take away, but all of us to take away on what can we be doing in our communities to continue to develop that, and so I hope that everybody takes that away. Having said that, I have one of the brightest panels that we have, and I'm going to challenge us next year to get one of the girls that are going to be on the list here. But Larsh Johnson, who's our founder, is going to moderate the panel. Fred Rahmanian is going to be here from Siemens Healthcare Services. Lowell Doringo, training manager from Disney. And Jack Azagury, who's Global Managing Director of Accenture, will all be on the panel, and I really appreciate your time and participation this morning, so welcome.
So how many people were bowling last night? Show of hands. Oh, wow, excellent. Okay, now how many people had at least one strike in your game? All right, you guys are all part of my team next year. So, one of the best things about my job right now, and as, sort of CTO for the E-Meter group and now for the larger Siemens software services, is I get to visit with a lot of different companies around the world, see different, problems in the businesses, things that they want to try to do, and applications that I think, can add value to what we're doing in terms of our software products and delivery. And it's just fascinating to see, all the different things, but also all the similar things. And one of the things we're trying to do with this panel today, and we had some great discussion already over breakfast, and I hope we can touch on half the stuff we already talked about at breakfast. But is to say, what can we, in Jesse Burst's words, harvest, from the other industries, right, and other businesses that are having a lot of really good success in dealing with information, dealing with data, and making it really useful. And I think today we're going to be looking to concentrate a little bit on both how do you improve the customer experience and also how do you improve the operations and the delivery. And I think with this panel, we have some very experienced and interesting thoughts about how those two elements go together and how data is a big part of that. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the panelists here to sort of take a couple minutes and introduce themselves with their background, a little bit of their perspective on this, and then we're going to get into some discussion on some key topics. So, Fred?
Fred Rahmanian. I've been with Siemens for almost 9 years. So my background is in software development and software architecture. With health services, as part of that group, I helped develop the very first data mining product that we successfully shipped. And more recently, I've been involved with the BI and the analytics group, and my interest is mostly in data and data sciences now. And I'm very passionate about data and use of data.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lowell Doringo. I'm currently the Operations Training Manager for Leadership Programs here at Walt Disney World. So, by the way, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Thanks for going to downtown Disney last night.
And what do you know that we did down there?
What everyone else does at downtown Disney. So my main focus is on leadership development and communications. My biggest takeaway, especially in regards to being a part of this panel, is how do we teach people how to use data? How do you make it user-friendly, not just from the client or consumer end, but mainly how do you have everyone from your top executives to your frontline employees contribute towards the accumulation of data and make it user-friendly, and to teach them the importance that their actions will help add to not just the data, but how we utilize that. And at Disney, one thing that we're really big about is numbers are numbers, but what's the story behind the numbers? What is the story that it tells, and what's the story that it could tell based on those numbers that you find? So glad to be here, and thank you so much.
Morning, I'm Jack Azagury. I lead Accenture's Smart Grid business. Every year we run 2 pieces of research, one where we interview 10,000 consumers every year globally to understand their perceptions of the world of energy, and the other one where we interview utilities globally. And the topic of analytics, we asked utilities, what is the #1 area of investment when you talk about modernizing the grid? And analytics came up as #1, and very, very strongly, especially in North America. It's a topic that dominates most of the discussions I have with our clients today. The good news is when we ask utilities, are you getting value from smart grid? Are you exceeding your business case? 70%, actually 69% said they are exceeding their business case. And the primary driver for that is leveraging the data. And so we're seeing a significant take-up. I would like it to be faster in our industry, but the take-up, we're seeing significant interest, and utilities really focusing on the value now. We spent a lot of years talking about technology. Now we're talking about the value, and in a lot of cases we see value from $40 to $70 per meter per year for the utility. If you take in societal benefits, over $200 per meter per year. So the value is there. Our clients are seeing it. Consumers are starting to understand it, although that's a whole fairly complicated process for most consumers who are not that interested in their energy, looking at energy graphs on a daily basis. But fascinating area, and looking forward to the discussion.
I think one of the things that's really changing, our industry right now, as we talked about this, is the fact that we're now generating a lot more data, or actually in some cases knowing that we're generating data that we hadn't necessarily even known that we'd had in the industry. So I think one of the questions I want to pose with you guys is, what kind of information are you collecting? What's the sort of the data sources that are important? I'd like to ask Lowell to kick us off with that discussion.
Sure, absolutely. At Disney, especially looking at parks and resorts operations, the kind of data that we accumulate can be everything from what is the opinion of the guest experience to how long is our wait times, what is our optimal level of efficiencies that we can run any of our attractions. And so we're looking at what we call just-in-time data, JITs, where we're collecting that information right there on the spot, whether we're using photocells to be able to capture the number of people going through a queue, whether we're using RFID cards to be able to measure the amount of time someone stays in a line. We need to be able to collect all that data because that allows us to make on-the-spot decisions to be able to enhance that guest experience. If we're noticing that a line is taking very long, how do we extend that queue? Do we have enough labor later on this afternoon to the point where we even have to say, do we need to extend our park hours because of the number of people that are coming through, and to provide that level of guest experience? On the flip end, looking at what we could do for the future state, it's about asking for immediate feedback from our guests literally right as they leave. So once they're checking out of the resort, because we're asking all of our guests to use that mobile technology to provide their feedback, we start sending out those emails about what you think of your experience and asking for that kind of, how do you have quantifiable data that will lead to qualitative results? And so we want to not just take care of our business day of, but then how do we continuously improve the guest experience for the audience as a whole, but even for that one individual guest as well. So how do you take care of everybody from the macro down to the micro level? And that's going to affect every single line of business, operations, food and beverage merchandise, even custodial, utilizing those numbers and metrics to be able to determine what is the cleanliness level of a bathroom, how often is it being cleaned, what are the areas that need to be cleaned, is there a bathroom that needs to get cleaned more than others? Like the one behind Mission Space. So really, it just doesn't really. So it's just trying to find out what is the frequency of certain things and being able to leverage that data. But as I mentioned earlier, it's really about having the frontline person understand that their contributions to collecting that data is going to help make their jobs better. And having them understand that when they have to write that number in that Excel spreadsheet, why are they writing that number down? And teaching that from, like I said, a 16-year-old who gets her first job here to a C-suite level executive, everybody knows that data matters because it contributes to the guest and employee experience.
So in healthcare, obviously, we have tons of data that's being collected now, and
yeah. So our challenges are a little different in healthcare. So traditionally, about 80% of data in healthcare is trapped in notes and unstructured text. So with the changes we're seeing with the regulation that's been happening with the the Affordable Care Act, so more and more clinicians are encouraged to use EMRs to capture discrete structured data more and more, which is good for us, but we still have the challenge of actually looking at unstructured text and extracting data from that. Now, once we have that data, with the changes that we're seeing in healthcare, going from the fee-for-service to a value-based type purchasing, the idea is to use this data to improve efficiencies and keep your patient population healthy. And keep them out of the hospital. In the old days, it used to be that, okay, the larger the hospital you had, the better it was, and the faster you could fill the bed, the better you were doing, kind of like being in a hotel or hospitality business. Now it's the other way around. We're seeing organizations giving back beds because they're trying to keep the patients out of the hospital. So using data to get to that point is, the nirvana for us.
So we were talking about the quantified self. Can you explain a little bit about that?
So in addition to that, in order to keep the patients healthy, we need to get the patients engaged in multiple ways, and one of them is with the quantified self that everybody talks about, the Fitbits and MyBasis and all the other tools, even the iPhone. I mean, if you look at your iPhone, or any smartphone, on average there are about 7 to 8 different sensors in every cell phone. I mean, some of them even have a barometer in there. They can tell you what the air pressure was, where you were at that time of day. So there's a lot of information in there that's being captured about you that could potentially help a clinician decide the next course of action. And on the other side, there's also, there was this, the Wanamaker, the old department store guy. He, there's a famous saying that everybody uses. He said, I know my only 50% of my marketing dollar works. I just don't know which 50%. And so it's the same thing with some of the when it comes to treatments. We know that a particular treatment maybe work for, and I'm not a clinician, but we know for a fact that some treatment may work for 70% of the population. So wouldn't it be nice if we knew 100% of that 70%? So we would not waste the treatment for 30% of the population. And maybe we can do that with the data that we can capture and data mining and data science and predictive modeling.
So Lowell, you mentioned the question about how do you actually get people to take care of this and value this, and that's part of your job now.
Yep,
absolutely. Is to help make sure that you're institutionalizing that. Maybe want to see how you're doing that, and then maybe have Jack comment a little bit about some of the things we're seeing in our industry.
Sure, absolutely. To be able to help your employees understand the importance of data and how it's going to affect them. A lot of times when people see numbers, especially if you're working in the entertainment and hospitality industry, numbers are scary. So how do you take away the entire idea that numbers are scary? Well, you integrate it from the very beginning. In our orientation program called Traditions, we really focus not just on safety, courtesy, and then the show aspect of our company, but really talking about the importance of efficiency and how their contributions lead to that level of efficiency. And so from there all the way down to OJT, when they're doing their training, they're not only teaching, our on-the-job trainers not only teaching them what numbers they need to start capturing when they're out there, they're also teaching them the importance of why. And a lot of times just answering the whys behind the numbers are really going to help them stay engaged and focused on when they need to keep up. Because at the end of the day, they'll be able to understand why we get hit so hard at certain points of the day with the number of people that are coming through, how we want to create that great guest experience. If we can be able to move our guests through faster, that means you'll have less guests that are upset, which means it'll be a lot easier day for you. So we want to make them understand kind of the trickle-down effect, the big picture as to why those numbers are important. From my end, doing leadership development training, I train all of our entry-level managers here at Walt Disney World, and it's about helping them understand the metrics, but it's about teaching them to teach their employees the importance of those metrics. And so it really is that kind of top-down effect of this is why it's important, this is how it helps the guest, but more importantly, this is how it helps you with your day-to-day, because a lot of times the power to control the metrics are in their hands. If they know that they can be able to start personally operating at a much more efficient level, taking on more guests or opening up more queue lines, they know that they can be able to make their days a lot easier, make the guest days a lot easier, and at the same time affect those data and affect that number. But it all begins with training, and it all begins with bringing them into the culture on day one.
So part of what we were talking about earlier is the KPIs for each of the individual rides,
Yes.
right? Are part of it's part of like almost a competitive system amongst the different ride operators.
It is. We have what we call guest carried target. So we want to try to be able to optimize. We look at the number of guests that we predict that are going into the parks versus the number of guests that are going to the attractions, the number of ride vehicles that are going to be operating versus the number of staff members that are going to be there, and then monitoring the hour-by-hour ride count. I don't know if any of you have ever been to our parks and been handed one of those red cards and somebody says, here, take this red card, give it to the person before you go into the vehicle. What that's doing is it's an RFID card. We call it flick. So we flick the system before they go in, and then before they go in the ride vehicle, we flick it again, and that gives us a time measurement of how long it took to get through the line. And we send several of those because some folks like that as a free souvenir. Some folks, it's the most boring souvenir ever, but it's Disney, so I'm going to take it. I'm
a VIP with the tag.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a part of the system. So we want them to be able to, and it's kind of funny that we do encourage that, and our guests will say, well, what is this for? And we tell them, this is to help you, help our guests, and because there's such a level of personal ownership with Disney, because people identify with the brand, they grow up with the brand. Oh, no, I want to help. Let me help you. And so it's kind of a neat, it's a neat thing that we get to take advantage of because there is that level of affinity towards the Disney brand and the Disney product. And so our guests are more than willing to help us, per se, with gathering that. But we were able to take the concept of maximizing capacity. In fact, if you've ever seen a single rider line does that for us because we want to make sure every ride vehicle has every single seat filled because you might be a party of 3, the vehicle holds 4. You riding by yourself? Come here, let's go ahead and put you in there. And that way, we can be able to maximize the efficiency of the attractions, meeting those numbers, telling us how many people we need to work on a day-by-day basis. So it really boom, 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 trickles all the way down. We've been able to take that to merchandise, knowing what our per cap is going to be, making sure that we have enough staff in the store to handle the number of people going in. We always know after 3 o'clock parade, the stores are going to get slammed because they're sitting right in front of them. So we always know exactly what our pinch points are. And so being able to know those numbers ahead of time to meet the demand, that's really what we focus on.
Yeah, I think that you said it right there. It's actually demand management. So basically, Jack, I mean, how are we doing this in our business, and are we getting some of this institutional buy-in to this, the value of this data?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, unfortunately, utility customers are not going to be that interested in helping their utility like customers.
Now, come on, seriously. Sure
That's
they are.
unfortunately the reality in which we live in. And actually, when we do our consumer survey, the trust in the utility, we've interviewed 10,000 customers every year, and the trust has gone down. But when we look at the applications of data, first of all, the volume of data coming into utilities is growing exponentially. Smart meters, sensing devices, a lot of discussion around video now, especially after some of the physical security issues. Even talks about using sound to detect insulation issues in underground. So a lot of social media, a lot of unstructured data coming in. When we look at the applications, we see three kind of big buckets. One is, how do I use the data to better optimize my assets and how I operate the grid? The second one, how am I using it to integrate renewables and distributed resources? And third, how do I use it to optimize the customer experience? We actually see in our survey, most utilities believe their focus in analytics has shifted from the customer to better operating the grid. Mm-hmm. And that obviously has an indirect impact on consumers. But when we see the biggest applications, when we talk about, we've done a number of business cases with utilities around this $40 to $70 per meter per year to the bottom line from analytics. The number one area is around asset management. So, you know, in the US, we spent just under $100 billion of CapEx in the utility industry. If we can influence 3 to 5% of that, you know, we'll start to get to very big numbers. And using the data, and some utilities doing that very successfully, using near real-time, even historical information across all their systems to make better decisions on the assets. That is where we're seeing the immediate benefit, which will drive reliability, which is obviously, and drive lower bills ultimately. So that's, we see a significant push in asset management. There are other applications getting a lot of focus around theft analytic, around outage analytic, especially after the storms in the Northeast and other parts of the country. But the biggest area of value is how to use the data to optimize the the investment of capital and O&M in the infrastructure. That's where we see the biggest numbers right now.
Yeah. And a lot of that is dependent on you know, the new telemetry, including smart meters and so forth. And I think one of the things in healthcare, Fred, is also now telemedicine, and you mentioned some of the personal telemetry. Talk to us about some of those.
Right, so I think, you know, telemedicine is becoming more and more important because, again, you know, we're moving from that fee-for-service for a value-based type of environment. And so what we're saying is keep them out of the office, because I can't charge for that visit anymore. So what happens is trying to get into the point where you can have the patient actually take a picture of, for instance, a rash and send it to the clinician and say, what should I do? And then at that point they can decide if they should come in or not. And but there are some challenges there that, you know, we have to work through, is because then you could become a little abusive about it. You could charge for every phone call, and then, or clinicians don't like to receive emails, you know, 50 emails from, if a patient can, you know, have a direct line to the clinician, they may actually ping them every day, all day, and so we have some challenges to work out. But it's actually very important, and Medicare recognizes that shift, and they're actually putting things in place for reimbursing for telemedicine. So we're going to see more and more of that, and that's becoming an important thing. And again, remember, with the phones that we all carry, there's so much we can do with that. I mean, and so, you know, you could, we talked about that this morning. You mentioned, you know, you could hold it against the LED and get your blood pressure or your heart rate. Or there's another one that I saw recently that you can actually hold it with your thumbs and it'll do an EKG. And so then,
watch how you hold your phone now.
Yeah.
They're watching.
So it'll actually be interesting to hold that in some of our meetings, hold it and see if if there is a case of ST elevation as we're doing this. And
it's a lie detector.
Good at job interviews.
I'm about to go have a heart attack right now because I heard this. So yeah, so as those come online, and then, you know, then there's no need for the patient to come in every time there's something wrong. They can just send that information, and then somebody has to collect that information. And then the other thing is, you can't expect the clinician to look at every piece of data that comes across. That's where we have to talk about predictive analytics, and then say, okay, well, or trending, or say, okay, I see the last 30 days, you know, she was doing okay, and then all of a sudden I see there was a change in EKG. as of
And
yesterday.
there's a legal exposure to having that data and
Right.
not analyzing it, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
If there's something showing in that data that that patient later has a problem with, and you didn't catch it, right? There's issues there.
Sure, absolutely. So it's actually interesting, and so we have to have a way of capturing that data, and we have to be able to do something with it. And then it also goes to things like, again, we're trying to keep the patients healthy without them coming into the office, and and I've seen organizations go through great length. I know of one place where during a very hot summer, they actually went to every of their older patients and said, "Do you have an air conditioning?" No. It pays for me to pay $500 to put an air conditioning in your place to keep your house cool during summer, so you don't come in from heat exhaustion. Because then that'll cost the system even more. So, that yes, we have to be able to capture that information.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, a lot of this is generating now more data through the mobility, and that may be social media generated, maybe new sensors in the phone and that sort of thing. And Lowell, we were talking about mobile phones and mobile in the park, right? That's created a whole new set of issues for you in terms of your interaction with guests and so forth.
It's been really interesting with the rollout of the My Magic Plus and the My Magic, My Disney Experience product that we have. It's all about how do we keep on pushing the guest experience? How do we keep making it bigger, making it better, and especially how do you make it unique? Because you can really go anywhere and ride a roller coaster. You can go anywhere and meet a favorite character, but what do we do to push ourselves? And it's really being able to take advantage of the increased use of mobile technology, but with, as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. It's Amazing Spider-Man 2 out this weekend. Go ahead and see it. What we find is that with the mobile technology, a lot of you can even see it. Look at a queue line. Everybody's on their mobile phones while they're there. Well, while they're there, why not go ahead and start booking dining reservations, booking your fast passes that you want to go on? We always hear that, of course, one of the number one complaints is waiting, and we live in a culture now today where everybody wants something bigger, better, faster now. And so how do we meet those societal demands? And so with the My Magic Plus system, taking care of a lot of what we would think of as tedious tasks, such as getting fast passes, making reservations, do it on the fly, and you can make the same day of changes right there in your hands while you're waiting in line, while you're, waiting for your spouse to come out of the bathroom, whatever it might be. And so, it's just the convenience of it all. But again, the responsibility, providing a Wi-Fi network that's going to be able to have the capacity to have because if you imagine every single guest, even the ones who are 2 and 3 years old, on a mobile device, do we have the bandwidth to be able to support that? And yes, we do. And that's one of the beauties of it is go into any one of the theme parks and there's the bandwidth. But then also the inevitable, my battery's dying. What am I doing now? Mobile stations, right? Mobile stations to be able to charge your mobile devices. But what's interesting is because we are Disney, making sure that they're themed to the land in which it is. So if you see a tree stump with a Mickey sign and an electrical plug, it's a mobile station, it's not a tree. So just, and we just want to make sure that we are staying true to who we are as a brand.
And does it automatically pop open if you have a low battery phone passing by?
That would be cool. I'll let Imagineering know about that. But kind of, what is funny though is, does everyone remember to bring their charger, with them everywhere they go? And the answer is obviously no, especially when you're on vacation. Right. So we want to make sure that we have all the right plugs for every kind of phone that might be out there, whether it's an iPhone 4 or iPhone 5. Is it going to be a Galaxy? Is it going to be a BlackBerry? Whatever it might be, we want to make sure that not only is there a place to charge your phone, but in the event that you forget your charger, do we have those readily available? Because if we're asking you to take the time to invest in this system, into this app, and to utilize it to make your experience better, we need to have the infrastructure, whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's the right plugs, they're available to support that request from us. So.
Yep. And Jack, in the utility business today, we're seeing a lot of new mobile apps coming out, information about your usage and other things. What are some of your
Yeah, I mean,
there?
the secret in utilities, customers don't want to spend time looking at charts of their energy consumption. It may be fun the first week, maybe the second week, but it's not people's idea of fun to wake up, look at the iPad, and look at a chart of consumption by 15-minute interval. So the secret in utilities is going to be set and forget. How do you take care of your consumers' energy needs with them having to have minimal interaction. The use of mobile applications is critical. We are behind where some of the other industries are. Consumers, even simple things. Our research shows the less a utility directly interacts with their customers, the higher the customer satisfaction. So it sounds counterintuitive, but the less time you spend on the phone with them or in a payment office, the higher the customer satisfaction. So how do you give them the tools to make it simple and easy? Customers, when they call the utility, it's usually not because they have something good to report. Yep. So how do you make it easy? How do you make it automated? How do you make it mobile? How do you bring it to where users are going to naturally use it? The perfect example is the Nest thermostat. The Nest thermostat is collecting information on an ongoing basis. It learns your patterns. You have to do very little, and it drives value to your bottom line. And interesting, the amount of information, we were talking about this at breakfast, collected by the Nest, huge amount of information available to Google now, and we see very little discussion around privacy. People go and they spend whatever it is, $200 or so for the device, but you give them a free smart meter, now they're concerned about privacy. And so again, how do you make the user experience one that is going to drive value to the consumer without having them to invest their precious discretionary time interacting with something they really don't want to interact with?
Yeah, that raises a question for the audience here. Show of hands, how many people click through a privacy policy online at least once a week without reading it? How many click through at least 2 or 3? How many ever read them at all? Yeah, okay. So much for privacy, right? This is an age where I think the service value overcomes the privacy issue, as long as that service value is clear. And I think, Fred, medicine-wise, there's a lot of service value. I see some interesting themes here because in the utility business, I think probably also in medicine, the outcome of I'm not having to deal with my customer is a better outcome, both for the customer and the supplier, right?
Yeah.
Disney's a little different, of course.
Well, there's also the flip side to that. With the accountable care organizations, one of the things we're seeing is one of the things they have to identify is do the risk verification for their patients. It's kind of like that. The top 5%, are essentially taking away about 90% of the resources. So those are the ones with the patients that are elderly, with the comorbidities, and all those guys. So the idea is to try to, use analytics with the data and try to identify those before they get to a point where they have to come to the ER. So if we identify people that are like pre-diabetic, let's go ahead and have some, nutrition training for them, or let's have them come in at least, do the A1C test twice a year. Those are the kind of things we have to do that analytic helps us do that with the data. But one thing that you were talking about when you were talking about the utility, the other thing is the comparative analytics that a lot of these organizations also want to know, how is the organization that's next door to me, how are they doing and how are they handling that? And as a utility customer, it would be interesting to say, the neighbor next door to me, his utility bill is 20% less than yours. Why? And what are they doing? Am I as efficient as the guy next door? But I think, the important thing, this is one thing that, data itself is great, but if we can't extract value from it, it doesn't do us any good. And analytic is becoming more and more important. And that, consequently, the whole new data science revolution that we're seeing, 3 years ago, nobody had ever heard of a data scientist. And nobody ever knew, and now we know everybody wants to be a data scientist.
Yeah. And it's a key shortage, so we need to have more women in data science, right? Is that what we heard this morning? Okay. All right, good. And they can be more on time to starting, panel sessions. Is that also part of this? I'm not going to draw any conclusions on gender there. Just an observation. It's data. Speaking of customer segmentation, Walt, how are you looking at your guest profiles? How do you use information to try to target experiences and use that in your business?
Absolutely. If you've gone into the new My Magic Plus system or the My Disney experience, you create a profile for each of the guests that are going to be a part of that account. So whenever I had my family recently come and visit about a month ago, and so I created a profile for every single one of my family members, and you even can tailor it with a picture of your favorite character that represents each of the family members, and then based on that information, you can add, are they celebrating anything? Is there a special occasion that's going on? It was my mother's 60th birthday, so you better believe I made sure that was in every single thing in there. But what was really great is you get what you put into it, right? So when we arrived to a restaurant, we checked in at the hotel, that was a constant, happy birthday, how's it going, happy 60th. And so she felt great, she felt included, she felt welcomed, and all it took was providing that level of information that we ask. In fact, if you ever book anything with dining, they're always gonna ask you after they get, the ages of the kids and all that, is anyone celebrating something special? Because we know that if you're going to celebrate, you're going to come to Walt Disney World, and we want to make sure that that celebration is acknowledged, right? So it's being able to create these profiles for individuals. They can, because with the new FastPass Plus system, the ability to see what attractions are you selecting more often than not, right? So then they know that we had small kids. I had my 2- and 4-year-old niece and nephew with us. Because I put in their ages, they'll send me emails saying great recommendations for the 2- and the 4-year-old, go to Disney Junior, go to all these other attractions that are geared towards them. And so it's about being able to let the consumer know what their options are, especially at a place like Disney where you're looking at 4 theme parks and so many different things to do. It can become overwhelming, especially for a brand new guest who's never been here. So to get those suggestions, to be able to get those pieces of advice that you might not know of, is going to help make the vacation much more seamless. It's going to make the vacation much more palatable, and at the end of the day, you spend more time interacting with your family and having fun than you are trying to plan on the fly.
Right. And behind the scenes, all this is going on, and basically you don't have to do anything to keep participating in that.
Yeah, absolutely. The goal is so that if the guest puts in what it is that they want to, the guest takes the time to invest. I look at some folks who buy brand new cars, how much research they do before they buy a car, because it's such a big investment. Vacations are a big investment now. If you're looking at the total price to have a vacation, you're looking at family of 4, if they're flying in, staying in a hotel, dining, the whole 9 yards. You want to do a little bit of your homework before, and with the mobile technology, with the website, it's even that much easier. You don't have to buy the old Birnbaum's book and flip through that to be able to find out the right things to do. So with that little bit of investment of time that our guests put into it, the output, let us take care of the rest. Mm-hmm. And so it makes definitely for a much more seamless vacation.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the back office operations, and particularly things around asset utilization and some of the sort of monitoring of systems related to some of the back end of the business, and what's going on with Siemens and Siemens Medical there.
So, we're actually, I think this month, we have a new product that's coming out that's going to target, again, that care management market, and it's called Care Excel. And we made the decision with that one to, go up with a completely different back-end structure in terms of, go big data, because what we said was we're going to capture data from various sources. I mean, the way care management will work is you're going to have a group of clinicians that are going to essentially be the care team. They're going to manage, and this includes nutritionists, may include physical therapists, the nurse practitioner, physician, and these are all could be various providers. We need to be able to capture all that data, put it in one place, analyze it, and then let the care team know what to do when for what patient. So in order to do that, we're using a big data infrastructure because we said, we don't know what we don't know. We're going to capture all the data. We're going to extract the value based on the questions we're trying to answer now. But we're going to keep that data because there may be questions coming up next that there may be things that are noise now and maybe signal later. So we're going to maintain that information and go back and constantly go back and look at that data and say, is there anything new that I didn't know 2 months ago that I know now, and try to answer new questions. So from infrastructure point of view, it's interesting that we decided to go a different route and capture everything in one place, have everything accessible for analytics. So the interesting thing, again, it goes back to the data science. The focus was analytics. We have to have that ability. And that's what we're doing. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this product. It's the first product that we're releasing using that and thinking analytic from the get-go. And again, that goes back to the conversation we had earlier, is that traditionally data is a byproduct of an application that we see as a cost center that we have to maintain, we have to archive, it costs us, and it's not a good thing. Now we're seeing it the other way around. The more data we capture, the better off we are. It's actually a profit center now, and that's very important. That's a major shift for us.
Well, you're talking about a medical records system also that is basically cloud-based, and
right,
where it's basically free because the value of the data that's being generated by that system.
Right, and then we can, once we have the fact that it's cloud-based, it gives us also other opportunities like the comparative analytics. We can say, okay, you're an ACO within this county and this is your population. It just happens that there's another ACO next door to you and they have this population and their cost of treating, for instance, congestive heart failure is 20% less than yours. Maybe you should consider changing your workflow or do it differently. Those are all the kind of analytics that we hope to do down the road. But EMRs, again, at the end of the game, we're seeing a shift in capture as much data as possible. Get that data any way you can. If it means via patient engagement, via gamification, encouraging people, the Fitbits, the quantified selves, anything. Because the more data we have, the more things we can do. And we're seeing organization like Practice Fusion is one of the fastest growing ambulatory EMRs out there, and it's completely free. And the reason it's free is because they're taking advantage of the data that the physician generates from the patients. An interesting fact about this was another big cloud-based EMR is Athena Health.
Mm-hmm. And EMR is electronic medical records.
So Athena Health, recently with the government shutdown, CDC wasn't able to capture the flu data, the flu outbreak that they report on a monthly basis, or I think it's even weekly basis. So what happened was Athena Health took that on because they had all that data in there and they started reporting it based on the data they had. All they had to do was anonymize the data, aggregate it, and say this is the flu outbreak in this region based on their data. So those are some of the interesting things we're seeing now. So yeah, it's very game-changing. We're seeing people just capturing as much data as possible, even if they don't know what to do with it today.
Yeah. So Lowell, we were talking also earlier about the asset optimization. In your case, you basically have attractions, right? And they're your assets, and they have to be running conditionally. You have to be monitoring them. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about how you're monitoring some of that. Obviously, you're doing load balancing with your waiting and queue management.
Absolutely. We have different departments that are going to be measuring different things. I think because we are such a large matrix organization, it's not necessarily about having generalists, but about specialists, right? So we would have folks who are going to be monitoring our workload for the day. So our workforce management team is looking at literally the hour-by-hour comparison of where are we in terms of park attendance versus where are we with the amount of labor that we predicted that we needed to have? Are we able to meet those needs? Down to are the brakes running at the pattern in which they need to be running in order to stay afloat with the attractions moving? If someone goes on break or goes on lunch, we can't have that slow down the operation. It has to stay continuous. So that's it from the workforce management side. From the optimization side for the actual attractions themselves, we have an entire team that's looking at data of the number of guests that are coming through, the number of guests that have come through the turnstiles. We're looking at the current wait status versus wait statuses from the previous year before that, to look for trends in the information. So there's a lot of key players. Then you have your guest service managers, who are your operations leaders on the floor, making those decisions to change the game right in the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. Do we need an extended queue? Do we need to call folks in? Do we need to let some folks go home? Can we be able to offer early releases of shifts because maybe our numbers weren't there, or it's raining?
So how's that information communicated to the folks out in the line?
They're all on radio. And so they're constantly on radio and they're making those calls to them. So they're going to be getting information from workforce management. They're going to be in touch with folks from our like industrial engineering team. So they're all in communication with one another, making those calls for the action to actually take place out.
So you effectively have a control center.
Yes.
And radio dispatching all the different folks.
Because they're checking all of those numbers, day of, in the moment, just in time, right? And then even more so about how great was the experience. You're going to find a lot of our research and development employees waiting for you after the attraction to capture your immediate feedback. What you think of the attraction? Did you like it? Was the queue clean? All those sorts of things. So it is about getting that data before, during, after, in order to predict, what's going to be like tomorrow, next week, next year, 5 years from now.
And Jack, obviously that ties in with what we're doing in the business today, especially around some of the asset optimization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the amount of, for many years, most of the maintenance on utility assets has been time-based and driven by regulation for the most part. Moving to condition-based and predictive maintenance is definitely the direction. Some utilities we deployed an analytic solution. They're actually using the solution with their regulators. So they sit down with the regulators to explain why they need to invest here and not here, why this transformer or this substation needs an investment and so on. So that's also helping drive a change in behavior and how the utilities interact with their regulators. I mean, we're seeing, data and analytics really moving information technology to become a C-suite agenda and to really drive competitive differentiation for utilities, where in the past, IT, information technology, and so on was more of a back office. It was a necessity. Now it's becoming a competitive differentiator, even for an industry that is as regulated as the utilities industry. But we have a long way to go. Only a quarter of the utilities we interviewed said they were well prepared for analytics and big data. So there's still a big journey ahead of us. We talk about the people challenge, which we talk data scientists, number one challenge. And there was a Wall Street article around people commanding very, very high six-figure salaries. I was with a utility a few weeks ago, and they said they lost their one data scientist. He retired. And this is a big utility, a big utility. They had one gentleman who took care of analytics and statistics and so on. Clearly that's going to be, we're going to see an evolution there. There needs to be a build-up of skills and capabilities to be able to really leverage the data to drive competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I think we also talked at breakfast a little bit about when you get it wrong, right? I think there's always the opportunity to say I'm analyzing this data and I'm coming to a conclusion, and boy, it just was wrong. Anyone have share some stories or insights there?
One of the things we deal with meters and sensing devices, these devices are extremely chatty, right? They're sending information on a constant basis, and then you're trying to process, let's say, this metering data in an outage solution to determine, who's out and who's not. Mm-hmm. And some of the early experiments, the flood of data was providing, frankly, incorrect information about who's out and who's not out. Is it a network issue? Is the person really out? Did somebody just tamper with the meter? What is the issue? So really, especially when you're getting high volumes of real-time or near real-time data, really understanding the data, filtering the data, and then the next frontier is going to be around machine learning to really improve the decision-making that comes out. And we're seeing that applied to theft. That's a big area where machine learning is starting to provide real benefits there. But especially with high volumes of data, the risk of using that information in the wrong way is high.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for us, it's not necessarily about reading it wrong or doing it wrong. I think sometimes it's those variables that you just can't help, correct? So in our business, obviously we're outdoor theme parks, and so our biggest enemy is rain. And if it's going to rain consistently for 2 days and your park attendance is going to go down, it's not that you didn't predict what your numbers are going to need to be. It's that it just happened to rain. Therefore, after you've had 2 days of solid rain nonstop and then it's beautiful for the next 2 days, those guests are on, let's say, a 5-7 day package. So what are they going to do? They're all going to flood the parks at the same time once the weather gets beautiful to make up for lost time. And then for us, it's a challenge of now how do we meet that demand in the moment, right? Regardless of what our data says from years prior, again, a factor like weather can completely change the game day of because of what it is that happens. And you know, you can predict as much as you want to, especially during, like, say, a peak holiday period when you know it's going to be busy, but then it might rain all day Christmas Day, but then the day after Christmas it's beautiful, and then all of a sudden our numbers have just influxed. And that's why what's really great about our culture is how do we deal with constant change, moment of. And so, you know, don't be surprised if you get that call first thing in the morning, hey, you want to come in early? and they ask that from you. I mean, we even, you know, I work in our offices, and even during those high peak times, it's get out of your desk and get in the park, start sweeping, start parking strollers, start serving drinks, do whatever you can, but it's all hands on deck, and it doesn't matter what your job is when we're in those busy times that we need people. You turn off your computer, put your stuff down, everybody's in the park.
Sounds like utility storm response. What about you know, misreads and miscues in the medical business?
Well, you know, we have the challenges we have there is you know, semantically normalizing the data that we get from various sources, right? Because and we have to codify that data, and even billing data, even claims data that you would think would be accurate is generally not very accurate because the code they use may not match exactly what really happened, but it was the closest thing to that. And then we're receiving data from various sources, various institutions. They have their own local mapping, and you have to somehow crosswalk that to a kind of a standard code that, you know, that industry uses. Right. How well did we do that? And so then we have to use that data for analytics. So then at that point your basis was wrong, so then your analytic is going to be wrong now, unless you are dealing with aggregate level type of data, which, you know, we don't always do that. So yeah, that is an interesting challenge that we have to deal with.
Yeah. So I think data standards and data, you know, common usages and so forth is clearly a big concern all around. And part of this is then also if you have this information back to the consumer side now, I mean, how can you provide value back to the consumer, you know, when you have some of this, right? And some of the issues there, of course, include privacy. Right.
So I think, you know, our biggest thing is in healthcare, we have privacy is a major issue for us, and then the information is, you know, we're seeing that open data movement. You know, patients want to see their data. So the question is, do we want to show them everything that they generate, or do we want to show them what's important? A lot of times clinicians don't want to give the patient all the information without having a consultation first, and then that requires a visit or a call or things like that. So those are all the issues that we have to solve, and we haven't fully come around solving these yet. But there is clearly a demand for people getting their own data. I mean, patients wanting their own data. I mean, even me, I've been wearing a Fitbit for 2 years, and I've, you know, finally, after asking Fitbit for a long time, they're actually releasing the data. So now I have my own data. Now I know what I did, 2 weeks ago that day, and so that's important, and it's becoming more and more important. People are demanding it, but it's a challenge in healthcare with privacy. Right. It's a major issue for us.
And you're making recommendations for people and delivering value through some of the information you're collecting. How is that working for?
You know, we've always had concerns about privacy. And, you know, if you've gone into our theme parks, you know that when you get to the turnstile, so we ask for a finger biometric scan before you go in, and that's from a security reason that all of our tickets are non-transferable. We want to make sure that the one ticket is used by the one person the entire time. And so one thing, we do take that extremely seriously, the privacy, not just for the sake of their own privacy, but for the sake of our brand, because it is such a family-oriented, trusted brand. We want to make sure that we live up to that. And not only live up to it, but really exceed it. So I know that with the new Magic Bands, there was a lot of concern about, you know, what about privacy, everything on there. Really, the only thing that's on there is an RFID chip that's inside that's going to identify that you're the user. All the data is going to be stored in computers that is extremely secure. And for making purchases, there's a PIN number that goes along with the Magic Band. To get into the parks, there's your finger scan that goes with the Magic Band. So it's a combination of the Magic Band plus another security feature to ensure that your privacy, your information stays as secure as possible.
Yeah, clearly important. I was going to say, if we have any questions from the audience, we have time to take a couple questions before we wrap up. Yeah, Chris.
I'm sorry, what was the
The
second?
blue button. I think the question was, can you discuss the medical blue button initiative for
Yeah, so that
data
was,
access?
I think that was, that started with the White House. I think essentially the idea is to get us to the point where patients have access to their data. I think we're seeing some movement there. It hasn't moved forward as much as we'd like to. It would, hopefully we get to a point where, and I don't know if it'll happen, is where data will be available, everyone will send their data, but then again, we have that interoperability issue, is that, so when the data goes to Blue Button, when it's available there, is it correctly normalized to a form where, the patients can understand? And even if the code is, two different labs may have different codes for the same lab, and has that been semantically normalized correctly? And so those are the issues. I think we'll see movement there, but again, I don't know where it's going to go yet. I think it's still too early to tell.
Yeah. Well, clearly, I mean, Green Button was inspired, I think, by the White House Blue Button initiative. Jack, I mean, are you seeing a big take-up in that, at least North American utilities?
I think we ask utilities if they believe that there are going to be businesses that are created out of the usage of data. Data markets, data-related business where the data can be monetized. And I was surprised by the answer. There aren't many answers in our survey that really surprised me, but almost 85% of utility executives believe there are going to be businesses around just leveraging the data. Now, we see it in every other industry, whether it's a Google or an Amazon or a Netflix or a Verizon or an AT&T. Everybody's leveraging our data and monetizing it for advertising and so on. I think that will come in the utility industry. It'll take longer, and we're going to have to overcome regulatory hurdles and so on, but it will happen.
Now, in terms of open data, I do have to add, we are seeing a change. I mean, government is releasing more and more healthcare-related data. I mean, Siemens recently released the provider utilization data, which is a treasure trove of information. But there's still some gaps there. So like that information would be really nice if we could, couple it with prescription data or quality data. And then that way we can let the patients decide, pick the clinician they want to go to based on their, how well they did treating certain conditions. That information is not available, but we're definitely seeing a movement in the direction of open data, and government is releasing more and more, healthcare-related data, which is eventually is going to be very useful for us.
In Disney World, I would suspect you have lots of very, very tight brand policies and so forth. Do you have an ecosystem of partners that basically where you share a lot of data about your operations and that?
It's going to be just like any other consumer-based industry where it's going to offer you opportunities to receive information from other, because obviously when you're looking at an enterprise like Disney where we do have our branches out into other kinds of entertainment media, so whether it be consumer products or movies or any of those sorts of things, the opportunity to receive those sorts, just like anything else, you can always unsubscribe, you can always opt out and that sort of thing. So we always want to make sure that we have that option for any of our guests, but we're very fortunate to have a brand that's very trusted. We're very fortunate to have a brand that people have introduced into their lives since they were babies, that they want to know. They want to know what's going on, what's new, what's next, what's exciting.
Where do I get that Frozen skirt and everything else?
Yeah, good luck finding anything Frozen related, folks. So, that's really where it comes from, because our guests want to know, and they take Disney not just for a vacation, but it's part of their lives, it's part of their homes, it's part of their their childhood. So it's one of those things where, again, we're fortunate that people have such an affinity to the brand that if they want to get those updates, if they want to get those newsletters, they can.
So we're running to the end here. What I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists to maybe share with us some thoughts about where things are going and observations and so forth. We'll start with Fred.
Okay, so I think this is very exciting. I think the kind of revolution we're seeing with data is very important. Now, what's important to know is that, again, data by itself is pretty useless. We need to learn how to extract value from data. And then again, so within organizations, there's a need to do an inventory of your data. First figure out what you have, and then after that you can look at the questions you're trying to answer and try to go after the data and find ways of capturing that additional data. The other thing is I think a lot of the organizations, if they actually try to do a capability maturity assessment when it comes to data, acquiring data and doing analytics on data, they'll be shocked. And I think that's another step that a lot of people should do, a lot of organizations should look into. And I think we'll see more and more of that. I think we'll see a lot of organizations, and we're actually already seeing in Silicon Valley and elsewhere where there are a lot of these startups related to analytics that are popping everywhere, and we're seeing everybody, there's a frenzy of buying these analytic, so there will be some consolidations there, but I think, again, the inventory of your data, understanding your maturity level in terms of how you can handle that data, and then going after and actually creating a dedicated data science team will be very important. And again, I think everybody's heard this so much, it's become cliche, it is imperative to become data-driven in the next 10 years, or you're just going to stay behind.
One thing that we're a storytelling company at Disney, and it is always about the stories. A lot of times, unless you're really invested in the idea of numbers and number crunching and looking at spreadsheets, it's what story does it eventually tell. People are motivated by stories. People are motivated by inspiration. They're not motivated necessarily by numbers. So how do you translate those numbers into stories? And so one thing that we have really worked hard on is enabling and training our leaders to be able to inspire our frontline employees, not with data, but with inspirational stories of how the guest experience has been impacted and improved, and figure out that, hey, this data is what's telling us that. So it's not just about the quantifiable, it's about the qualifiable. So how do we say that, this little girl who came here for the very first time and she felt like a princess? Well, that's because we were able to create an efficient experience that was seamless to get us there. So if we can show them what the end product is of what we are as a company, then that makes collecting all of that data worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So a few takeaways. First of all, Spider-Man 2 this weekend with the family. Thanks for the reminder. When we look at the industry and we ask utilities, do you expect more competition? And we see it, but our utility executives believe, 85% believe there will be more competition in this industry. Beyond the meter services, in-home services, solar and distributed generation, on-premise, storage coming into the fray. And so the big question is, how do you use the data to get closer to your consumer, to better understand the consumer, and avoid this disintermediation that may happen with other people vying for the energy consumer. And the reality in the industry, we don't actually know who the consumer, we know the bill payer, but that is not the consumer. When we look at how well a Disney understands its consumers, or how well a doctor understands its patients, we have a long way to go in this industry. And that's an issue where, we're gonna have to use the data to make the customer experience seamless, to provide value, to increase customer satisfaction, and to help address this increasing competitive threat that is coming from beyond the meter and distributed energy resources that are going to impact the industry. So it's a huge challenge ahead of us. A lot of utilities actively working through what their utility of the future look like. And big data is going to be a big part of it. Got to focus on where is the value from big data, how do we get the people, and how do we get better data governance and better processes around the data. So,
yeah, and I couldn't agree more with all that. And I think takeaway for me is really going to be around two things, right? One of them is the guest experience, right? And that client experience that I think as an industry to address these competitive challenges is very important. And I think along with that goes keeping the patient healthy. And I think both of those rely on data, and as well the back end operations, right? Because that front end operation, right, is dependent on reliable and safe delivery of energy, and in a low cost and a competitive environment. So as much as we want to promote the front end. We got to make sure that that data helps us drive the back end, because that service delivery is all about the customer in the end, and customer satisfaction is what's going to keep this industry going. So, as they said the other day in the opening comments, we're all part of this transformation, and if not us, then who? So I want to thank our panelists for joining us. Perspectives from outside the usual box here, from our industry perspective. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Thank you. Yeah. Good job, guys.
I thought that was a great way to start the morning, to share the best ideas and best practices. We started the conference saying that it was all about sharing information and learning from one another on where we can go. And as part of that, it's the celebration of wins, because one of the things that we can learn is learn from one another. And we take every year an opportunity where we love to congratulate and celebrate the success of our customers. Everybody's got different milestones that they achieve with that. And so with that, I'm going to take us through customer awards right now. I'm going to start with the City of Fort Collins that I'd like to congratulate. They get our Innovation of the Year award right now. They've taken really the whole smart grid software product to the next level, but with the engagement of the consumers. Fort Collins is the first Siemens customer who will go live with the Energy Engage mobile product. They've made a commitment to a product that wasn't fully developed yet. We have a number of customers that we've done that, and we've celebrated year over year. But they've really continued to work and engage with the product team to do this. And what's important in this collaboration, and one of the great things that I think that we see, is they not only take their ideas, but they take the best ideas from others and help represent those. So even though we have one utility that's helping develop that product and we get it out of our user advisory board, each of the utilities in Fort Collins is a perfect example of that, where they actually contribute and are thinking of the community of utilities, and more importantly, the community of end users. So where Larsh and Disney and others were talking about the user experience, this has been very much taken into account into this product. So I'd like to welcome the Fort Collins team up to celebrate their awards. Take this, and I'm going to step right over. Nope, step right over here. Congratulations. Oh, there he is. Come on, there you go. Good job. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And if you check our webpage, they're also one of the success stories that goes up here. So her face is famous across the board. The next reward that I'd like to give is somebody who's actually not able to be here today. They actually got called by their Ministry of Energy, and that is the Qatar Energy General Electricity and Water Cooperation, Karama. You could read all that up there, right? And they really are a pioneer in the smart metering technology powered by the eMeter MDM in the Middle East region. They actually started on this project. Interestingly enough, the selection of this was the day that we announced the acquisition by Siemens. And this is a very large turnkey product. Karama is the sole electricity transmission and distribution utility in Qatar. And they're being very proactive in the smart technologies that they're rolling out. So from an aggressive standpoint, I think what's interesting, and we saw this in the telco industry as well, is some folks that have come later tend to leapfrog us and where they've been because they've taken the best learnings. And I think we're starting to see some of that in places like the Middle East. We had visitors here from Pakistan as well. But I'd still like to give a general applause for the Karama and the Qatar organization for all that they've done, and we will be mailing this. I can't wait to see how long it takes to get there. All right. And one of my favorites, and we're going to tell a couple stories, is the Lifetime Achievement Award to JEA. And JEA, I think, was our very, very first customer. And they've made significant business and technology transformation changes. The number of projects that they take on for the size utility they are is just enormous. They have been working to integrate their Oracle CIS system. They were one of the early brokers and designers of that between CIS, Energy IP, CGI Mobile Workforce Management System, Landis & Gear metering systems, and web portals as well. So just consistently pushing the envelope on the number of technologies and having a seamless footprint. And I'll tell some stories about JEA later, but I really would like to congratulate them for all the work that they've been doing in the communication and the partnership. This is, Michelle's helped me out 7 years, 8 years, because you were on the original JEA? 2005. Fantastic. So welcome to the JEA team. I know you're out here because I saw some of you at breakfast. Very exciting. Congratulations. Fantastic. Scoot, 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 scoot. Away from the front. Go all the way in front of the chooks. Don't break it now. There you go. Fantastic. That's really wonderful. Congratulations. That's great. The stories that they have to tell of all of the things that they've been through and all of these. I loved at the breakfast this morning. Everybody was talking about milestones that they were finishing and going live or getting ready to launch, and they're like, and it's so fun. It's just so fun. We're at that fun stage. I want to talk a little bit and round up the summary. It's been a really busy. We shortened the event this year. And we've crunched it down. We'll be looking forward to getting feedback from you on how the overall event went. We tried to get very, very focused. We tried to bring it in earlier in the year. So a couple things that we're looking at is, we had the most global audience that we've talked about. We're talking about the number of places in the world that we do this and how many of these we can take on and have, frankly, a big enough audience, because it is about how much information that we share amongst one another, right? It takes a tremendous amount of work. I would like to take a moment and have my marketing team, Stan, who actually put on this event, who did just an amazing job. I hope they're still in there, not getting ready for something else. They're in the back. What was the term? Seagull management. Yesterday, I have to admit, this happened in about February, and it was my fault. I called Burnt and I said, can we move the event up in the year? Because it's starting to get late, because it was starting to look like it was going to be past Memorial Day. And from a fiscal year standpoint and communication getting too close to the summertime, I thought, gosh, I'm not really comfortable with that. Can we move that up? So to tell a marketing team who's trying to do something that normally takes a year to put on an event like this with 4 months to go, that I'd like to move it in by 2 months. Let's just say I'm pretty sure there were some choice words that were used at the end of that. But not only did they do it, they changed the location from San Francisco to Orlando so that we could reach a much more global audience, and I think picked a phenomenal venue across the board. We opened the conference talking about really 4 transformation drivers: the digitalization of data, decentralized generation, customer-centric, and the IT/OT convergence, right? And really this key of the data-empowered utility, right? I've said, and a number of other folks that have written about it more eloquently than I, that the trading card in the utilities in the future is really going to be how effectively they use and manage data to run the business, to go into, to reinvent themselves when it's to be reinvented, to speed up things, you know, how fast they can integrate data when they're doing acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions. You'll see the ones that do that well and don't do that well are the ones that get the data together very, very quickly and effectively, and the transformation of this. The customer centricity of this. And again, I want to use JEA as a study on the customer centricity of something that can be done. It was, 2 years ago, because it was Bernd's first meeting that I took him to. It was a 360 review we were doing at JEA. And they opened the meeting specifically by saying, listen, we're ranked pretty low in the J.D. Edwards poll and studies that come out, and that's something that we take extremely seriously. We have to get this fixed. You know, we've put in all of these technologies, and they had put in just all the technologies that I listed off earlier, but we're still, and who said it there was Jack who was saying it, you know, the less you hear from you, the less you're communicating with the utility, the higher the customer satisfaction rate goes up. Well, that's not necessarily a good sign, and so they really have worked to fix that, and so it has been through the use of data and how they make those systems work together. And they have changed, and they were awarded this year, I think, by J.D. Edwards, the most improved utility in the United States, based on how they've done that transformation. So I think that's fantastic. And it is that power of data and the systems and the technology and the focus on the customer, right? They sit in a storm-laden area, and we were talking at the executive panel that so much judgment is based on how fast you get back on, how well you're communicating with those customers when you're facing the storms. And so it's something that's a daily life for them, and it's been fantastic. We also had session during yesterday's session on the business case approach to the utilities business. I understood that this was an absolutely jam-packed session. I'm sorry that I missed it. You learn how the utility can make yourself and future-proof your decisions, which won't be easy, and you have to do that through the use of data so that you can actually plan and basically work through, you know, outdated and future regulatory shifts, right? Something that the e-meter product was built on was the concept of being able to adapt very quickly to regulatory changes. But you now have a lot of options to fit the needs of the business, to change, to go solve for point solutions, sometimes to get ahead of it, sometimes even to help make the cases with the regulators. From non-technical loss to pay-as-you-go, e-car operations, were a number of these areas where you can actually take a lead and make business cases. And we've heard over and over again the concept of making those business cases and the value for the consumers so that we can actually help educate the regulators as well and get in front of them. So that you'll see a more active role from Siemens as a part of that. In the renewable energies and integration session, decentralized power generation from renewable sources, having that be more expanded more intensely and integrated into the distribution grid. As a consequence, the grid management has become more and more challenging for the utilities. During the session, Dr. Koch talked all about how the Spectrum Power active network management system, and I had to read that so I didn't mess it up, is an intelligent tool for the distribution grids and making, you know, this visible at all times, right? So we're talking again, visibility and access to actually make those decisions, to take very effective and fast countermeasures before critical situations arise, right? So it is, you know, we were talking about this in the healthcare situation. Disney's talking about it in terms of getting people in queues and people, you know, getting more people on staff. Well, it's not critical from a life or death situation. It is pretty critical on the success and how many people will come back. So I think we've talked about that. So the active network management and intelligent tools, making the grid status visible, and the countermeasures that we can take on. leveraging advanced metering infrastructures. We talked about common opportunities, that the data isn't valuable. It's actually also mission critical. This was one of my biggest learnings coming here, is understanding how not the MDM system always, but the information, the energy IP platform is actually a mission critical system. And it's about the data, right? We talked about acting on the OT-IT convergence opportunity, integrating AMI with the OMS systems, leading to improved network analysis, and the criticality of that. We talked again about the storm outages. So being able to leverage the data not only from the meters on the homes, but all of the field devices, and the fact that the field devices are becoming more and more mobile, so that we really can drive the operational efficiencies and customer satisfaction. Again, so if we can get in front of these things by understanding when there might be outages, when we've got spikes in other areas, when people are away at work and we can tweet to them or text them and say, hey, your power's going to be out for this number of hours, so they don't go home and wonder why everything's a bit on the fritz. All of this is important, and being very open to the different types of sensors, whether it is sensors on transformers or starting to communicate with the Nest thermostats inside of the homes. What we haven't spent a tremendous amount of time on, and part of this was feedback, but I want to close on this, is the so what. So what do we do together? We talked about if not who, will do this, and it will be also a when, right? We're going to do this. But what Siemens can do is we bring together the platform suite from the smart grid solutions. So we have the full suite of applications we've talked about. Good for you. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. We could take all day to continue to go through this. But it's the software and the devices that we have that are available to work with you. And it doesn't have to be all Siemens. I think one of the other things that we've shown is the entire ecosystem and the number of folks that we're able to work with, whether it's with other outage management systems that are available, whether it's with different sensing technologies. Of course, we'd love it if it was all Siemens, but it can't be. So that interoperability is something that is key. Something we've not spent a lot of time on in the past, but hopefully you heard a great deal of this week, was a number of the service offerings that we have. So from the consulting capabilities from our PTI organizations, from the network, the Power Academy, TD that we have available, the consulting work on the business practices that we've done, the introduction of the Omnetric group as part of the family. So there's a whole suite of services that we're also bringing to bear. So it really is. We started with this. Thomas asked this as a favor early on, to embrace the transformation, right? What are we going to do together to do this? So we've got to seize the opportunity at the core of the evolution so that kids and grandkids will one day study a lot of this and what we've done in schools, that these will be the case studies that in the future of how we transform this industry. Like I said in the beginning, there's probably only 2 industries, this one and healthcare, that are the last 2 really big transformation. And it's going to be a bit of the race on how well we do this and how well we manage the data to do this. You're the key, we're the key. The partnership of this is very much the key. And so what I'd like to do is in those 4 areas that we talked about, we're going to keep a constant dialogue through the year, and I'm going to be looking for the case studies next year in each of those areas with the different customers and partner communities. And I think we'll get up and we'll see not only the utilities up here, but the partners that help make it happen. Again, what has been leveraged to do this? So if we can do this together, the world's going to, I think, frankly, be a better place, and everybody will win out of this. So I'm really looking forward to the ongoing partnership that we have as a result of this. If there's any questions, hopefully you've met an entire community of people, one another, as well as a whole group of Siemens folks that we haven't had in the past at these conferences. So you have a much broader set of team members that are available and resources for you to work with. Our partner community, again, I'd like to thank the partners who help sponsor this event, but also help make us a better company, and I think make your own solutions a better solution. So thank you to the partner community who's here. So overall, we're going to go on to the exciting thing, and to make up for my 5 minutes I was late for the panel, I'm going to give it back to you now. There was another word he used for that, condensing of time. So we have a couple of events this afternoon that are available to you. The Grand Cypress bus will be leaving at 1 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. To do both the Disney World and to the golf session. Is Megan in? She has her jacket on. I did. If they're not signed up for either of these, can they still sign up? And what is that process?
1 and 1:30 you can golfing, and for Walt Disney you can use the shuttle from the hotel, and then when we leave here you can grab your tickets at the registration desk.
Perfect. And then this evening there is going to be a barbecue at 6:30 that you're all welcome to, and to tell the stories of how well those Disney lines and queues and the analytics and who got the red cards to go into line. I'm just wondering if they do the red cars at the golf tee off as well to see how long. I wonder if they measure how long it takes to get around the golf course. So anyway, I wanted to thank you all very much for your participation. I look forward to seeing you next year and to continuing the dialogue throughout the year. Thank you. And so Megan just informed me, if you have your families here and would like to have your families join us for dinner, you are most welcome to bring them to the barbecue as well. And there will be no talk of smart grid and smart meters other than what you want to take on.